Yep, I'm hitting record. Carolyn's ready. We are recording. All right. Welcome everyone. Hi. For those of you who are not downstairs in my class, my name is Emily Tuttle, and I'm the Limestone University Gallery Director and Art History Instructor. Today, we are pleased to welcome Ashley Holt, all the way from Germany. He's the featured artist in our gallery down at the Heinz and Riggin Center. For those of you who have been to visit the gallery, you might have picked up on Ashley's kind of particular brand of humor, especially given the title of his exhibit and his publication, Humor, Character Witness. Yes, humor. We'll get a good dose of that. So for those of you getting to know Ashley, Ashley Holt is a man with a girl's name, which I think is the best introductory sentence to a bio I've ever read in my life. He's worked as an illustrator since 1989, producing art for books, periodicals, television, theater, apparel, and even skateboards with major clients like Business Week, the Boston Globe, and Turner Classic Movies, just to name a few. The collection on display in the gallery includes a variety of celebrities and politicians, artists, and illustrations that reflect Ashley's interest in environs and society and American culture. And is implied by the title character witness. He draws them like he sees them. So thank you, Ashley, for joining us all the way from Germany. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This has been a really interesting and wonderful experience so far that I get to sit here on this other part of the globe and watch you guys struggle to put this show together while I just sit around and eat Pop-Tarts and stuff. So it's been wonderful and very gratifying. So I'm very happy to be here to talk to you, and I'm very happy to be speaking in English. I should emphasize any opportunity that I have to do that is great, because working with the other language is still fraught with difficulty, let's say.
I'm sure your German is coming along very well. And Carolyn just typed in das gut. Yes, very good. Yeah, I'm sure it's nice for a little break. And guys, keep in mind the time difference. So it's, after dinner time in Germany. So this is a special treat for Ashley to kind of take this time out.
That's right. It's way past my bedtime. It's it's already dark outside.
It's already dark. Yes, exactly. Well, I hope some of you guys have had a chance to go over to the gallery. I'd asked you guys to go yesterday, so fingers crossed we all made it over. And I know some of you have been over there with me and helped with the install, which was fantastic. Ashley, do you mind if we start off with some questions just to get started, and we'll kind of take it from there?
No, of course not. Yeah, however you'd like to proceed.
Sure. So in your work, you definitely indicate a great knowledge of popular personas and characters, especially since we're seeing all these familiar faces in your art. What is your process for selecting subject matter? Is that more client-based, or do you have some liberties when you're working on these projects?
Well, as far as having knowledge of the popular personas, that's actually kind of funny. Before I had moved here for the past 20 years or more in the US, I had no television, very rarely go to the movies. And my understanding of popular culture figures, the celebrities and so forth, was coming through magazines. Because I'm involved as an illustrator, involved in magazines. And so, of course, I'm reading magazines all of the time. So, for example, I think you have Paris Hilton there in the show or whatever, which was, an illustration assignment. I don't even really quite remember from long ago from an entertainment magazine. I know about Paris Hilton's, legal troubles and, all the kind of tabloid events of her life, but I've never heard her speak. I never saw her on television. And so, I'm getting, I think, probably the better end of the deal as far as enjoying a celebrity's career, because I just get to read about the arrests and who's getting divorced and who's suing who and who's got a heroin addiction and all that sort of thing, without having to suffer through the the TV shows and the movies and things that made these people famous in the first place, and so on. As far as the choices, if it's an illustration assignment, of course, that's something that's being assigned to me. And sometimes it's like in that case, somebody that I'm not really familiar with and so on. And other times, if it's just a piece I'm doing for myself of my own entertainment, that obviously would be something that I have more of a personal connection to. Although there have been cases where I've started to work on a portrait just for the heck of it, only because I happen to have that photo reference around.
Nice.
So if I happen to have a magazine that had, a lot of photos of a particular person, and I'm just sitting around and doodling and so forth, and I get a halfway decent little head going, and I go, oh, that doesn't look too bad. And I had no intention of drawing that person, but next thing I know, I'm halfway into a portrait, and I go, oh, okay, whatever, I'll go ahead and finish this. Why not? So it really doesn't matter to me as far as the portraits are concerned, who I'm drawing. Because the challenge is always essentially the same. Every face is different, every, circumstance editorially about the presentation of that person is going to be different. And it's going to be a challenge, if nothing else, to get that likeness to my satisfaction, at least. So it doesn't matter if it's somebody that I'm deeply familiar with, that I love, or that I hate. Once I'm in it, it's really the same uphill climb with all the same sorts of challenges as I go along. And I think that's the reason that I have continued to do it, and that I, at a certain point, decided to make that my primary focus and what I was trying to promote as an illustrator, is that it's always hard. And that means I never get bored with it, because each time I'm having to do it, it's just like I got to start. I got to build the whole mountain from scratch every single time, and I go in from the very beginning and go, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but we'll see how it goes. And in every stage of the process, I'm fixing a little bit, and the mouth's not quite. What happens if I move the eye up here? Oh no, that's totally wrong. So it's just this terrible tightrope walk. I would be a lot more relaxed if I drew anything else. If I just drew monkeys or cars or something that I could just practice long enough that I could get good at. But because this is the same challenge every single time, I think that's why I keep coming back to it. I'm not sure if that was even your question, but that's...
No, and I think it opens up some other questions too, because we have, we've got some art students downstairs, and I know when you and I had talked previously, we talked a little bit about your process, and I think you kind of started to touch on this a little bit. A lot of our students kind of have these like big goals for life after Limestone. And it's, we were all there, right? We were in undergrad, and we kind of had that vision for what the next step is. But what is that process for you as a professional now, as you're creating each one of your characters? Is it start with basic drawing? Do you go digital right away? Can you talk a little bit about how those characters are created?
Well, Emily, let's go to the videotape, because I have some slides here that I can show you if you would like. If we can get this modern technological miracle to work on our behalf here, I am going to attempt to share my screen, and you tell me if you can see that.
Starting to think about it.
Thinking about it.
There we go. We're here.
Okay. Only thing is, I've got to slide that out of the way, and then I'm going to try to get this to work from the current slide, so we can still see that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So this, I'm going to kind of take you through the whole step by step, since you so politely asked me to do that. And by way of introduction, this was a job that I did for Turner Classic Movies. Actually, it was a lot of different portraits that I did for Turner Classic Movies. And basically the way this would work is that you'd have a movie marathon for a particular character. Or for a particular actor, let's say, for that particular day. And then my drawing would appear on the screen throughout the day for that particular person. In this example is Charlie Chaplin. The one thing that was interesting about this, it added a little bit of an extra headache to it, was for some convoluted legal reason, I couldn't actually just draw a portrait of that actor. It has to be a portrait of that actor as the character that they're playing in a particular movie. So I always had to pull some little piece of something out of the film. It was easy to do in this case because Chaplin, for legal reasons, we couldn't even dress Chaplin in his usual little tramp uniform like you're used to seeing him, because I guess the Chaplin estate comes down on you for that kind of thing.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but we could do this from The Great Dictator, no problem. You just put him in his little phony Nazi uniform and so on. But see if we can get to move forward here. This is a lesser known actor named Lee Tracy. I was only familiar with him from a couple of different films. I'd seen him before I did this job. And the film that this was coming from, I believe, was Bombshell. Yeah, I believe that was. So the process is basically what you're seeing on the left there. There would probably be 2 or 3 sheets like this, where I'm going through and I'm finding as much photo reference as I can for Lee Tracy. It's much easier to do that today than it was in the dark ages, because we have Google image search and that sort of thing that makes this very easy, even for somebody who is, not necessarily a well-known figure. But of course, I'm also looking at the film itself when I'm watching and kind of freeze framing that thing. And that helps a lot. I even did that in the old days when I couldn't find reference somewhere else, because particularly when you're talking about celebrities, they tend to present themselves in still photos in a kind of overly perfect way. But if you're watching them in film, or YouTube clips is good too, you're seeing how the mouth moves. You're seeing if it has maybe the mouth twists a certain way or the eyes crinkle up or certain, you're seeing what's happening when they're talking and moving. And that can be really, really informative to give you something to kind of capitalize on. Here you can see the first stage of this is really horrible looking. This series of sketches over here, again, I'll probably have, 3 or 4 pages of this sort of stuff. And it looks like I drew it with my foot, because I'm really not obviously trying to, do a finished, complete, nice looking drawing at this stage. I'm just trying to talk to myself about this person's face. So I'm really looking more at the reference than I am at the drawing that I'm doing. And I'm sketching these with a ballpoint pen. And I do that because I don't want to give myself the opportunity to erase and refine at this point. I just want to do one little doodle and then do the next little doodle and do the next little doodle and keep going. And each time I'm doing that, I'm trying to discover another little something about the face that I think I might be able to work into the final piece. And eventually, I'm hoping to get to this stage where how I solved the problem I was telling you about before, by the way, is Lee Tracy in the film at one point sticks his head through Joan Blondell's window, and her window curtain had a distinctive little design on it. And because Lee Tracy is otherwise just a guy in a suit in the film, that's really all I had to work with to say, okay, this came from this particular movie. So that's why he's leaning in the window like that, as was a scene in the film. So I've got to do a little doodle. These little doodles that you're seeing, I mean, they're probably, not more than an inch high, these little scribbles that I'm doing, little thumbnail things. And then I'm getting into this crazy cycle of scanning and printing and scanning and printing and scanning and printing. And so what you're seeing there on the right side, for example, is I've scanned a little Lee Tracy head that I think is maybe okay to start. And I've scanned a little drawing once I finally figured out what I want the body and the rest of the thing to do. And I've put those 2 little scribbles together, probably in Microsoft Publisher or something basic like that. I'm printing that out very lightly so that I can draw on top of it, and I'm refining it and I'm fixing things and so on and so on. And it sounds very convoluted, but once I'm in the zone, it's usually going pretty quickly, where I might take that one, scan it, blow it up a little bit larger. Maybe I flop it, because it makes a difference. If you twist the stuff the other way, you see things in a way that you didn't see originally. And each stage of the way, I'm trying to improve the quality of the drawing, but also keeping an eye out for what's going to help the likeness each stage of that. And it's just the way that I've developed this uh, process of going from scribbly gobbledygook to refining stage by stage by stage, because I'm allowing myself as much opportunity to fix things as I can, and I'm allowing some accidents to happen. If I'm in the scribble stage and I might bend the hand or a certain way or something like that, and I go, oh yeah, why don't I do that? That's kind of cool, you know. But mostly I just want that safety zone where I know I can repair things, because this is sort of my philosophy of creating art, is that you are making something that ain't so good. Maybe it's terrible. You know, maybe you've put something down on the page. Maybe your first note of music that you're trying to write, or first thing that you do, and it's so terrible, you just never want to do this again. It's so awful. And then you fix it. And fixing it is the process that keeps you going, you know, moves you forward. So eventually I'd get to something like this, which is maybe pretty close to the stage that I would actually ink it. We'll get to that in a minute. And you can see, you know, each step of the way, refining. I might take that, I'm going to put that on my light table behind me here, and get a piece of Bristol board on top of that, and I'm going to ink that. It's not a complete inked drawing in the way that my, you know, black and white cartooning would be, because it's not meant to be a finished piece itself. This is operating really more just as a kind of a blueprint or a schematic, I guess, in a way that gives me something that I can scan then into the computer, and then I start working with that, filling the color and so on. I'll show you how that works in a little bit in a minute. But here, just to give you an idea that, you know, the finish here that I've made, you know, certain more corrections along the way. Once I've got it into this digital form, I can still keep fixing things. I can keep fixing things 10 years later if I want to, because I can always open this file up. And I've done that many times when I get tired of looking at an old drawing that's really, really terrible. I can still grab the eyes and move them around, or stretch the face and squash. You know, I've got a certain amount of things that I can do at this stage that will help it along. But just to back up a little bit, this is an older piece, but this was one where I still had, you can see on the left side, the ink to the actual line drawing that was inked in there. So you can see how I'm filling the color, and then around that chin area, you can see where I am bit by bit eliminating that line work around it. So it's kind of a cheat, in that what I'm actually doing is I'm pretending that I'm making a piece of vector art as if I've created it from scratch in Illustrator or a program like that, trying to get that look, but I'm trying to do it in a way that's starting from a foundation of my traditional drawing that I'm more comfortable with. So it's still coming from that cartoon land that I was more comfortable with from the start. And then as I'm filling this color in, of course, and I'm taking the shapes away, you can see here that some of those lines still exist in the final form, the little swirly things that indicate the folds on his pants and so forth. The little guitar string that's coming off the head of the guitar, that's the actual line that came out of my pen. I've just changed the color of it and so on. So it's trying to get this balance of shape and line is a really interesting challenge at this stage. But that's essentially it. You can see in the finished piece there on the right, because this is an older piece, the Syd Barrett here. And you can see that there's a little bit of gradation work that I've done in Photoshop. The red stripes on the floor do a little light to dark as they recede towards the background and so forth. The cat has some little gradation things that sort of helping to define the legs on the cat and things. I really avoid doing those kind of things now. This was kind of in the early stages of doing the digital work, where you want to play with all those bells and whistles,
Absolutely.
But I really try to limit that vocabulary now to, it's either a line or it's a shape, and I want to try to, I like the challenge of balancing that as much as I possibly can. So, yeah. So, I mean, for the digital work, that's essentially the process. And just to give you another example of it that's even more convoluted, because I actually saved most of the stages here. This was obviously this is not a portrait piece. This was for my illustrated essay column, The Symptoms, which is the other primary preoccupation of my creative life. But what's embarrassing but kind of interesting to me about this is that when you look at what's happening in the upper left, the first stage, that it looks worse than something I would have drawn when I was 5 years old. But that's
A
just
talented 5-year-old then.
but it's just the first little scribble that I'm putting down to try to just think, okay, well, what am I drawing? Is the guy on the left side? Is he on the right side? Is the window above his head, below his head? What's happening outside? I'm just trying to figure out what the thing is that I will want to put down. And then bit by bit, I'm getting out of that 5-year-old scribble stage, and it's getting, a little more mature, as I'm refining that thing. So it's like every single time out, I have to remind myself, oh yeah, I went to art school and I've done this before, and I learned some things, and and it doesn't have to be a scribble that's incomprehensible. Let me keep working at it. But it's like stage by stage, I become an expert in drawing this one drawing because I'm doing it over and over and over again until I start to refine it and get it where I want to go. So either doing, the black and white, this one's got some digital color in it, but whether I'm doing the line drawing stuff or whether I'm doing the digital stuff, it's all starting out with that scribble stage. And I didn't tell you my dirty dark secret.
Oh,
My dirty dark secret about the digital pieces is they're done in Microsoft Paint
really?
primarily, yes.
Wow.
And because I tell people that and they go, well, Microsoft Paint, that's the thing that 3-year-olds play with and so on. But obviously what you're seeing there is that I'm not actually building the thing from scratch in Microsoft Paint. I just need a program that I can open the line drawing in real big and fill it up and, just go through and physically, manipulate the lines and so on the way that I want to. And Paint was the way I started doing that when I first started working with the computer. And so old habits die hard, and that's just why I stay with it. I will open the thing up in Photoshop here and there, or other programs to do other little particular things when I need to, but the bulk of the work has done that. And my friends who are, graphic designers, illustrators, and so on, they look at the way that I'm doing this and why is this so many, you could be using this software or that software. I said, well, why are you doing it in this backwards way? And stuff like, I don't know.
Oh, I'm so
just
intrigued
creature
that
of
you're
habit,
using Paint, because Paint is something that we associate with, it's our first program on the computer. But, if it allows you to blow up that image, I think that makes wonderful sense. And guys, remember, I'm not tech savvy, and I keep telling you guys, if I can design a poster, you can pull up your basic programs. This is a professional artist using Paint that you guys have been using since forever. Plus, good teaching moment. He's talked about shape and line and color. Those elements of art never leave you. And I loved when you were talking about the window for your character as well. We just were talking about things like iconography and recognizing people because of an instance or a symbol or something like that. So I think thinking about these things helps us kind of relate to these characters a little bit. So in my mind, I'm just geeking out by all of that. But yeah, I hope, for the kiddos are kind of getting a lot to think about here. It's excellent. Oh, awesome. With all the projects you've done, because you have quite the extensive list of things that you've worked on and people that you've worked with, is there a project that was particularly special to you or you kind of related to on more of a personal level?
For the commercial jobs, Turner's probably the one that springs to mind, only that because that was, for a lot of reasons. I could write a whole book about the Turner job. That was happening at a very weird time in my life, and it was really kind of stressful, but also kind of great. I really got free reign to do things the way that I wanted on that job, which was amazing. I don't think they made any changes at all in what I had turned in. but also because I already live in that world. I'm a classic movie guy. Like I said, I don't know anything about, modern celebrities, very rarely see modern film and so on, but I will watch any piece of crap film made from 1946 out of the Hollywood studio system, no matter how terrible it is. And I don't know why. I'm just programmed to be an old man in that respect. So I already lived in that world, and those are really the best kind of jobs where somebody says, hey, you want to draw such and such, and you're like, yeah, I would do that for free, no problem. Let me in there, So as far as other more personal projects go, I would have to say it was bed bugs, which is kind of an ongoing project that I continue to do it in various forms as illustrations and so on, but it was originally a comic strip that I did when I was started when I was in college, and it's simply a comics version of my dream diary.
Okay.
And I had the idea to make my dreams into comic strips at the exact same time that every cartoonist in the world had the idea to make their dreams into comic strips, which was kind of cool in a way because there was this very brief sort of dream comics renaissance that was happening that that I was part of, which culminated in being part of these, comics anthologies and things, sometimes along with a lot of other cartoonists that are really admired. I would not have embarked on that kind of project if my dreams were ponderous or frightening or, heavy or, gave you too much to chew on. I did it because they're funny. My subconscious is just funnier than I can ever be consciously. And I would wake up from these things and it's just like I was delivered this surreal comedy sketch in my subconscious that I write it down. And then when it was time, to do a new piece, go through the dream diary, like, yeah, I forgot about that one, and so on. I don't do them in comics forms anymore because comics, that was the old me. But I do them as, let me see if is my screen still sharing here or I need to resume that. It's still there?
It's still there.
Okay. Let me go to show you this right here. Oh wait, that didn't work. Da 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 da. Sorry, I had a bunch of random stuff here, but oh no, wait, go back. The one that you see on the right there is a more current Bedbugs drawing, obviously not in comics form. You probably can't read what that says down at the bottom. It says Bedbugs number 476. It's a random number. I don't actually number the dreams. I sculpted the giant arm in the cave, but the hand broke off. Now, this is not particularly funny. I just thought it was an interesting visual image, why am I in this cave? I don't know, but I got to do this sculpture, while I've got this water running there and so on and so on. The other drawing that I have there is not a dream drawing. That's kind of, that's from the pedestrian part of my my artistic output, which is that's a person that I saw at the dump. I refer to her as the dump dish because she's at the dump and she's doing her recycling, she's throwing her trash away and so forth. But she was strutting across there like she was on the runway, just working it, And I said, she's pretty amazing. I did a little doodle of her, and piece of paper, a little book or something, and every now and then I'll pull those things out, where I like, if you just encounter some street lunatic or, something like that, it's something that I feel the need to document those people in some point as well. Anyway, that's what that other piece is there. But the Bedbugs thing, I liked a lot because I don't know how involved I want to get into this. I'm not keeping
all
track
about
of the
your
time, so
subconscious.
you'll have to shut me up if I'm going on too long here.
No, this is great.
I was, just to give you an example, I was involved with a program from a mental health organization years ago, and they ran an art studio for the patients for the, this mental health organization. And I volunteered there a few times. I went in and, talked to them about, something about my art and the caricature, stuff like that. I had no interest in anything I was saying because they were all in their zone, very obsessive about what it was that they wanted to do. And there were always a couple of guys in the group who were working on the book. And the book was this never ending project of illustrations and slogans and little writings and things. Sometimes they were religious, sometimes they were just little inspirational messages that they were giving to themselves about dealing with whatever problems they were dealing with and that sort of thing. But I really admired these guys because there didn't seem to be any question whatsoever what they were going to be doing when they woke up that morning, as opposed to me, who's pacing the floor and going, oh, what am I going to do? Oh, I don't know what direction to go in. Da, 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 da. These guys got up every day and went, I'm working on the book. What you got to do today? And it's kind of like, if you know Wayne Thiebaud,
Yeah.
you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's all cake and ice cream, for decades and decades. He's still alive, I believe. I mean, he's gonna be like 103 or something now, right? But it just seems like such a relief to have that sort of obsessive devotion to a particular vision of some kind, where a guy gets up every, what you gonna do today, Wayne? I'm gonna paint some cake. Hey, we're all going out to the club. You want to? I got these cakes to paint, man. It's cake and ice cream today, So just because he loves the way that the paint looks like the frosting on the cake, and that's been enough to sustain him for all of this time. All that to say that Bedbugs was really the one time where I felt like, because this is a dream and because it's something that's sort of being delivered unto me by the subconscious, I don't have to write anything. I don't have to make up anything. I don't have to make any decisions other than what dream am I going to do? And everything else is just a problem of how to put that across, and how to make that happen. So I can't think of anything that would be more personal than dealing with your own dream material. So of course that's the personal project that I felt was the most rewarding for that reason. So.
Oh, excellent. And you said you had started this while you were in college?
Yeah. I had, that was, this was back in an era where weekly papers were still a big thing because the internet hadn't killed all of their advertising dollars yet. And so I did a lot of weekly paperwork for, that good 10-year period or so on. That really sustained me, and it didn't pay well, but there was always tons of it. And as far as the illustration work was concerned, I always liked it because it was fast, which meant it didn't give anybody time to argue about it. It was, can you get it here by 5 o'clock on Thursday? Yeah, sure, it's there. And it either ran or it didn't, as opposed to other situations you can get into it as an illustrator where there's 57 committee meetings, and it's like, oh, well, we asked Bob in marketing and he thought that the tennis shoes on the little girl should be blue instead of green, There's no time for any of that stuff. It just got to run, So, but I was doing that. I was actually doing two weekly strips at the same time, and everything else that I did on top of my schoolwork, which was already drawing all the time, was illustration jobs. So I just constantly had all of this stuff coming out all the time, and I have no idea now, because I'm the absolute laziest artist in the world. And I look back on that now, I have no idea how I accomplished all that, other than just sort of manic adrenaline that runs through you when you're a young person and you can get all of that stuff done. It was all terrible, but there was a lot of it. And, I mean, it was terrible in the sense that, I was very young and I was still,
You've
working
moved
my
on
way
since
through
then. Yeah.
it. So, um, like you and I had discussed before, that kind of uh, gave me this idea that you have a great number of really bad drawings inside of you, and the faster that you can get those bad drawings out of you, the better. And that's one thing that being in school and really having to work frantically does for you. Because it really, especially for artists like me, because I don't really have kind of natural inclination for drawing. Drawing is difficult for me. And that's not false modesty. It's just how it is for some people, where there are some who can just pick up the pencil and immediately start putting down this just luscious, perfect looking stuff. And then there's other artists who are like me, like, no, I got to fight for that. I got to figure out, and that's gotten worse as I've gotten older. I've been becoming more and more one of the artists who like, wait, I don't know exactly how I want to draw the right foot on this character. Let me sit down and make little sketches of that. I like that. I like giving myself more and more options and giving myself more leeway and so on. But back in those days, it was just about produce, 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 produce. So I didn't have time to overthink these things. And especially now with comics. Comics is just, you've got so many drawings in the little boxes that you've got to, pump out all at the same time. You can't sit there and think, I don't know, maybe I should redraw that ear on that one guy. And so I say, you've just got to let that baby bird go. Um, so yeah, there was quite a lot. There was quite a lot going on there. What were we talking about? College?
Weird. Oh, I was asking when he started bed bugs, and he said in college. And I think we had talked about this too a little bit about um, your journey starting with SCAD and how you were kind of when you and I had talked previously about you kind of taking these illustration jobs. Um, would you maybe expand for us a little bit about that journey of becoming an artist? Because you kind of started on that already a little bit about I'm in college and I'm taking these newspaper jobs. I'm working on these illustrations. It's fast paced, but you've kind of had a really interesting, extended
Yeah.
career.
Well, college was already weird for me. To back up a little bit, I'll tell you why I had the head start that I did, and that's because of my older brother. And my older brother, there's a 10-year gap in our ages, and he was also an illustrator. He's no longer with us, unfortunately. But because he was so much older than me, and first of all, it kind of normalized the idea of creating art in our household because there was this other guy that was already doing it. But he also, I think he kind of liked the idea that it gave him sort of a mentor role. And he had this little wide-eyed kid that was running around. I go, wow, what are you doing now? But it put me ahead of the game in a lot of ways because as he was moving into a more professional arena in his career, I benefited from all of that because I learned about all the graphics tools and all the printing technology. Well, we learned about a lot of things that soon became outdated once the computer came along, honestly. But it was still a great advantage, and it was a training ground for how do you do this professionally. How do you take this idea that you want to draw and you want to create, and how do you move that into an arena, where you can actually make some money. So it meant that I got there a lot quicker than other people my age was, and I was already in high school. Again, it was all very bad work, but I did get paid for it, so it does count. Um, and there was a 5-year gap or so between high school and college. I went to college a little bit later and spent those 5 years just kind of doing different kind of jobs, doing kind of illustration work. I illustrated a couple of books. I had a couple comics published, and whatever little jobs that I could get along the way, but not having much focus and not having much direction and so on during that time. That period I also refer to as the best years of my life. didn't have anything really in particular to do, you know.
Just
But I
figured it
said,
out.
okay, enough is enough. I've had my wild years, so let me actually go to college and make it happen. But for better or worse, what it meant was that when I went into college, I was very monomaniacally focused. I knew exactly what, don't talk to me about any of that other stuff. I know exactly what I'm doing. But that was good because I got to study illustration specifically. I got to study with people who were very focused on illustration as a commercial concern, um, which I'm not trying to present myself as a breadhead by any stretch of the imagination, but college is expensive. So even though I like, more experimental art and, gallery art, and I like John Cage and I like all this weird stuff, I didn't want to pay money to go and study how to do those things. I wanted to, pay money to do something that seemed like it was more practical. So it was a pretty good fit. Um, but it meant that, as I say, I was already doing illustration work and I continued to do that. And I don't know how healthy that was, honestly. I think on the one hand, I did get a lot of bad work out of my system, like I said, but looking back, it seemed like it might have been more mentally healthy to do what everybody else did and just get a job waiting tables or do something that was going to get me out of the house and so on, because that whole period of college, I mean, I was just, people knew not to bother to ask me, hey, you want to go out this weekend and do the da da da? It's like, he ain't gonna go. Like, no, I got to do the thing, and then
Doing my thing.
on
Yeah.
Tuesday. So it's like, I was just, it was, but I was very focused, but probably to a fault. I was a problem for my instructors for that reason. Because they would sometimes say to me, hey, you're in college, you can experiment and kind of go crazy. This is your time. Nope, nope.
This is what I'm doing.
I got rules, following the rules, man. This is the program, and so um, just how my head works. What were we talking about?
I was like, I was so engaged with your story about college. And I think that's great for some of the kiddos to hear too, just because I think they kind of come in with an artistic style or a preference, and it's hard to let that go, So, learning to say it's okay to experiment's great. But you
Yeah.
had a career in libraries as well, and that kind of opened some different doors, and
Well,
you moved to some
that
different
actually
places.
turned out that turned out to be a good thing because I did do several years. I did teach for a while right after I got out of school. The less said about that, the better. I was working as an illustrator exclusively for a while. And the bad thing about that is you can't say no to anything because you don't know if the next job is coming. So you get put in that position where the phone rings, you better take it, no matter how bad it seems. And having another dependable line of income made things much more comfortable. Where I thought, well, I can really kind of focus on what I want to do as an illustrator, and this other stuff that smells bad from a mile away, I can stay away from
Let
that.
it go.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a good thing, but I think the other part of it that was good was it got me out of the house, forced me to deal with real people under real circumstances, and just be a normal person, because I think it's healthier in the long run to remove yourself from that insulated art world and actually get in touch a little bit with how the real world operates. Because as if you get into a situation where you're working as an artist, or you're producing art on your own, and then you're teaching, so you're talking about art all day with everybody, and you're involved in art history, and you're going to gallery openings, and all your friends are artists and so on. And so you just sort of live in this little art bubble where the real world's not touching you, which is wonderful. I mean, that's what I thought that I wanted. But when I did, start working at the library, that turned out to be a much healthier balance, let's say, not only just to have that source of income, but to have that excuse to engage with real people about topics that didn't have anything at all to do with my little artistic preoccupations and so on. And so yeah, that turned out to be a good balance. The library job did kind of become semi-creative because I started doing graphics work that I was there mainly because nobody else was really doing it.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, mostly it was unrelated to my creative life, and I think that was probably a good thing, really.
And while you were at SCC, you are also managing a kind of a gallery space there as well. So, I think it's kind of another creative outlet as well. So even though you kind of said you stepped out of this,
Mhm.
the art bubble, you're kind of letting your bubbles kind of cross over, your
Mm,
spheres overlap. Um,
mm.
so no, I think that's kind of an interesting
Because
way
because there
to
was a
blend.
big blank wall there, big
That
30-foot
would drive me
wall, and there
nuts.
was nothing on it. And I said, I want this to be our gallery, and I'm the person to do it because I'm the one that knows artists. I know who to call, and I know who I can get in here to do this. So that's really what generated that. I was really lucky. I mean, I worked at the public library there in Spartanburg for several years before I was at SCC. But in both cases, I was given a lot of leeway to make my job creative, which I was really grateful for. And in other cases, I just insisted on it. I'm doing this. Try and stop me. Yeah, okay, all
All
right.
right.
Do your stupid art gallery. Jeez. Not like we're going to pay you anymore. Uh,
But I think it's nice that, we don't necessarily think of those like library spaces, interacting with the arts. And it's so true, those of us in the field kind of know these things kind of blend together in a lot of ways. So them kind of saying like, yeah, if you want to go for it, you're like, and I will.
yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I also knew, as far as college went, because I knew what the illustration field was like, and I knew that this was a freelance occupation,
Right.
and that it's feast or famine. I went to school with a lot of people who, after they graduated, they went on to work Nickelodeon, Disney, and things like that. So their environment became a little more 9 to 5 than mine, but I didn't want to do that. Um, I knew I wanted to have a little more control over how personalized my artistic efforts were going to be, and I knew that illustration was what I wanted to do. But there are very few jobs in illustration where you're just going to go in and punch the clock and sit down and produce the drawings. It just doesn't happen. Um, so I at least went into it clear headed that way, that I don't think I'm getting rich at this. Um, and it's true that, I mean, I'm not saying you can't get rich at it, but I didn't want to do advertising work.
Sure.
For one thing, I wanted to stay in editorial. You make less money that way. The few experiences that I've had with the world of advertising told me that decision was correct and I shouldn't be doing that. But what was I going to say? Emily, what was I going to say? It was all leading up to something that was dreadfully important. I'll sip my tea and think about it.
Uh, Marketing, not your editorial, not for you. Illustration for you.
Oh, the bigger idea there that I always try to tell people that go into illustration is that you don't make it. In other words, no matter how big the job is, no matter how lucrative the job is, you might make, a good amount of money on that particular gig, and that seems like that gig's got a lot of visibility, and so on. But you pretty much go back to square one after that, almost always, where you're just scratching and you're putting your self-promotional material out and you're trying, hey, everybody, look at me, and so on. Because I know many, 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 many artists, and there's only a very small percentage of those artists who can really tell you what they're going to be doing next. And I say, well, right now I'm working on this book, or I got this deal with this such and such and such. But once that's over, I don't know, hope something else comes along. So it's definitely not a career you want to go into if you're thinking that, oh, one day, the door opens wide and the red carpet comes out and, oh, yes, you're in the club, and so on. Because, I mean, for one thing, you develop a certain relationship with, art directors or certain publications that you like and so on. Those people move on, new art director comes in, they hire all their friends, and,
Then
you're
you're
out the
kind of out
door.
looking for the next gig
Yeah,
somewhere
yeah, yeah.
else. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not trying to give the bleakest view of this as a career choice, or for art generally as a career choice, but I think you do have to be, um, well, the way I like to put it is an adjustment in attitude is that if you think of your choice to create art, I hate the word lifestyle, but I don't know what other term to use here except lifestyle choice. Is a lifestyle choice first and a career second. So you're always going to pursue opportunities and try to make people aware of your work. But you got to be in it for the long haul, and you've got to understand that I mean, first of all, most of your time is going to be spent in a little room like this one by yourself. And if you're not wired to be cool with that, it's like being a writer. If you can't sit down and just for hours and hours type that stuff out, if you're too extroverted for that, you're going to have to go and do something else. But that whether you're doing the work for yourself or whether you're doing it for publication, whether you got a great paying job or small paying job or so on, your life is still going to be sitting in that room by yourself and grinding that stuff out. And so your biggest headache is always going to be what's actually on the paper, no matter what that is for. As far as promoting yourself too, I try to think of that in more general terms, that you just take advantage of any opportunity that you can to create awareness about your work. Because I mean, I go through the process. I have for years where I've built a list of potential clients. I find out who the art director is here and there and so on. And I do this mass mailing of postcards to try to direct people to my website, to get work and so on and so on. And it's very rare that that actually has a direct cause and effect. Where
Right.
somebody gets the postcard and says, "Oh, I'm calling that guy because he's doing great work there." Someone is somebody has found out about you from another job that you did. Somebody else that told somebody. People contact me. I don't even know how they found out about me because I don't know them. They don't know me. They don't even know how they found out about me. So, you have to do those things, of course, to go through the rounds of promotion and so on. But I think it's better just to think of that in those more general terms. I'm taking advantage of whatever opportunity I can to just let people know I'm alive and I'm doing this thing, and maybe
Uh,
something comes of it.
I,
Something.
I agree. I mean, I was talking to one of our seniors the other day, and I was like, I hate that phrase. If you love it, you won't work a day in your life. That's not true. You're going to work your butt off for it, and sometimes that involves the marketing of your work. So I think that's a big part of being an artist. Yes, is making sure that you're making these great connections to get your art out there. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. It's another question of building relationships, kind of relationships that you're going to have with people. The other thing that I always try to tell younger folks getting into the business is when it comes to terms of professionalism, um, which is obvious. Everybody's going to tell you, yes, you have to be professional and you have to be on time. Obviously, the deadlines you have to meet, and you have to be organized. And you have to do all of these sort of things, which you should do. But the ugly reality is that your client half the time will not be professional. Your client will not return your call on time. Your client will not pay you on time. When you have created your little masterpiece in your studio, as soon as you have released it onto somebody else, you have to relinquish because you don't know what that's going to be given to an art director. They're going to squash your work, stretch it, chop it in half. I've had art directors open my work in Photoshop and change all the colors to fit their color scheme or their layout, that kind of thing. And you hate it, you see it in print and you go, what do I do? But you can only get mad about that so many times before you just, and that's just the way of it. It was brilliant when it left my studio, and then you're faced with the decision, am I going to work with that person again? Probably not, if you can help it. Like, well, if they're going to treat my work that way, then I'll move on. Not everybody's going to treat your work with respect, and that's another thing that I tried to learn over time, because I tended to have, especially in the early days, this very humble kind of street level approach to how I wanted to talk about my work, and how I wanted to present my work. So while all of the other illustrators were promoting themselves with these, very expensive, or actually in those days, you actually put a portfolio into a big box and shipped it to some art director that you were trying to impress, and they would ship it back, and you do all that sort of things. That's if you didn't live in New York and you could actually pound the pavement. And I didn't live in New York, so and I never wanted to do that. It was too expensive and it seemed too pretentious. And I always tried to think, well, what can I do that's just disposable? So I was making these little books, and they were just kind of flimsy. And I thought, okay, well, this will show you what my work looks like. But then when you're done with it, you throw it away and it's no big crime, and so on. And it was really the wrong approach entirely, because ultimately, if you and how you are presenting your work, if you're not showing your work respect, then no one else is going to show your work any respect. And I was kind of coming from this sort of punk rock mentality, like, hey, man, I'm keeping it real, yeah, you don't like it, throw it in the trash. And they did. So, I got what I wanted. Um, but so that's another thing that I've always tried to keep in mind over the years. The other thing that I started doing was, if you look, you might see in some of the older pieces that I have, I was signing it with this little AH,
Yeah.
there, and so on. I don't do that anymore. I write my whole stinking name in there, because I know that I'm dealing with very distracted people when I'm sending my work out there, and I want to make sure that there's no question the name of the person who put that on there. I've had other, art dealers and folks say that to me in the past, that the most important part of any piece of art is the signature.
I mean, they got to know who the artist is if they're going to come back and ask for more. So absolutely.
Yeah, look, this is all a very crass commercial way of looking at things, and I've always tried to kind of strike a balance between what I'm doing as a illustrator, professionally, what's meant to attract clients and what's meant to hopefully get more work for me, and how I'm applying my skills as an illustrator to, any just venting my spleen, or talking about something personal or something that I've observed, or those kind of things, because in the end, uh, when we're all gone, you want to feel like you left something behind that actually said a little something about you, that actually expressed something about you as a person, and so on. I get that gets a little more into possibly the kind of narrative concerns, maybe, that you and your class are talking about. But
Yeah,
have
that
we
was kind of one of
frozen?
my other questions for you too. Is one of my special topics classes is discussing narrative, and I mean, characters are
You've
such a part of
frozen.
a
I don't know
narrative.
if I've frozen.
Ooh,
Oh, you're back.
we're back.
We're good. Okay. All
Okay.
right.
Whew. Scary moment. Yeah, you mentioned narratives. My special topics class is working on narratives right now, and we've talked about a lot of different characters and um, kind of how those characters change depending on who the artist is and how they're interpreted by the viewer. And I'm wondering if you feel like there's a specific narrative that you're kind of falling in line with, outside of your own personal narrative. Is there kind of a long historical narrative or a social narrative, or anything that you think you might specifically be engaging with for your work?
I've thought about that, because I knew that that's what your class was about, and I don't have an easy answer for that, especially not for the portrait work, because that gets into this abstract area of, if I'm drawing a famous person, which my primary reason for doing that, of course, is that I want to be able to show you that I have the skill to do a reasonable likeness of somebody. So I have to do that with people that you would recognize. And what we all have is our kind of unifying cultural experience are these pop culture figures that we recognize, and so on. As far as what the narrative would be about, what that has to do with the experience of celebrity or how we relate to celebrity, I don't know. Because I mean, I don't really know why it is that people respond to caricature the way that they do, but they have for centuries.
Absolutely.
Um, because it's essentially an insult by its very nature. Even if you're a kind-hearted individual like me, who approaches it from a standpoint of, I don't ever want to do a bad-looking piece of artwork.
Right.
So even if I'm drawing somebody that I can't stand or I think is just hideous and so on, my own ego is at stake. So I'm always going to make that, no matter who it is, I'm going to try to make that look the best piece of artwork that I can make it look, you know. But there's something inherent in the art form itself that is satirical and has a level of ridicule. So if you are, you know, as I sometimes do, you know, commissions for people, and that's really sketchy because then I've got to present that piece of work to that person as if to say, look how big your head is, look how your teeth stick out, look at that awful nose you've got there, and so on, you know.
Right.
And why do people want it? But they want it. I mean, I have, you know, drawings that, you know, other artists have done of me, and I want more of them. Even though I look at some of them and go, you know, it's like when you hear your voice on tape for the first time, and you go, "Oh no, I don't sound
No.
like that." For some reason, people are still craving that reflection of themselves, you know, back to themselves, in spite of the fact that, you know, they don't always like what they see. You know. I mean, narrative as an illustrator deals with narrative. I mean, that's easier to talk about in comics, obviously, because it's it's clearly a storytelling form. But as an illustrator, you're doing one of two things. You're as a single illustration. Say if you illustrate a book, you illustrate Treasure Island or something, and you've captured a moment from Treasure Island that you're literally going to, you know, illustrate. You're making a decision about what that specific focal point in that story, why that's important. You have to balance between what the text is already telling you and can the illustration tell you something slightly different or from a different perspective or reveal something in a different way about that and so on. Any substantial body of text really doesn't benefit from illustrations. They're just a kind of icing. They're just a kind of thing, a kind of a pretense of the book publishing trade to have them there at all. But I love them, of course. So I always prefer that, you know, I like a book with pictures in it, you know.
Agreed.
Um,
Absolutely. Best accent ever.
but the other thing that it will do, which happens quite often in editorial illustration, is it acts as more of a like a some mode of symbolism. Let's say when I was in art school, we used to call them money tree assignments because you see this a lot in you know, magazines that have to do with economics. You see a lot of this in illustration generally, actually, you know, where there's a, you know, flying carpet that's made out of a dollar bill that, you know, represents the stock market, and there's a tree with dollar bills on it, and somebody's picking dollar bills off the tree, and the tree is the Empire State Building or something like that, you know, where you're making this weird little allegory out of your symbolism there to try to illustrate a main theme or a general idea of that article. And this is honestly why I went into portraits as heavily as I did, because so much of my early illustration work was about exactly that kind of headache. If somebody's giving you this article and you're just pacing the floor and going, "Oh, what do I do?" You know, like you're thinking like a gag cartoonist or a political cartoonist or something like that. And illustrating a portrait is primarily just a drawing problem. How do I make this look like Dolly Parton? You know, there might be some editorial guidance for that, but honestly, I mean, most of the clients that I've dealt with don't really want that. They just say, "This is an article about so and so. Give us a drawing of that person." Yeah, great. And I love that because that is more closely associated to traditional portraiture. Like when you would put the oil painting of your
Right.
great
Like a
grandfather
Henry VIII kind of thing. Yeah,
up over the
absolutely.
hearth and so on, and that kind of thing. You can't represent somebody's whole life with that one image, of course, any more than you can represent everything you want to say about yourself in a single selfie or something. So, because that's so limited to that one picture, what do you think? Because you're much better versed in this question of narrative than I am.
I mean, I think what I love about your work in regards to narrative is that you are capturing kind of that character in that moment. So it's a character in that moment, like example, your Turner Classic Movies. So example, hold on. I have Judy,
You have
with
Judy. Yeah.
I have Judy Garland, so everybody can see.
Mm.
You're capturing Judy in, a certain particular form of character in Mimi in St. Louis, right? So,
Mm.
it's a character, but it's telling that story from that particular movie, but you're also telling the story of this actress and her kind of career as an actress in this kind of moment in time where she's playing this iconic character. So for me, like seeing a single portrait like that, it just starts the wheels turning on, starting to ask these questions of who is that particular character and why that particular costume, and in your case, who is that actor or actress playing that role, and how did they come into that role? So it starts unpacking a lot of questions about why this particular series of events that kind of led to this one image. And I think if you're going back, art historically, since that's more of my area, what is the purpose of that art? What are you telling us? If you're going to have a portrait of a king or a queen or Napoleon or something like that, what is the message here in this art? And I think for me, when I look at your work, that narrative is how many narratives can you pull out of that? A particular film or a particular politician, it makes me start wanting to ask other questions to kind of start parsing out why you've depicted them this way.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I can tell you with Judy Garland is a good example of one particular challenge, which is this is somebody with a very long career. And as you probably know, the latter portion of her career was rather troubled, substance
Bad.
abuse, alcoholism, and things like that. And she went through long periods where she was not in very good shape at all. So when I, as a caricaturist, have to come at this in terms of I want to try to capture this likeness. Yes, of course, I'm going to the particular film because I have to get those costumes and all that sort of thing. And I'm seeing Judy at a particular, kind of midway point in her life there, where she's still portraying very young people, but she's not really that young anymore herself. But I'm looking at photo reference throughout the whole course of her career, and the face changes. And the face changes to reflect almost a totally different person as we all transform over time from that little Wizard of Oz Judy Garland that we knew, hanging out with Mickey Rooney back in the day, to what she was towards the latter end of her life. And I have to make all of these decisions about how I'm going to balance that. I am borrowing certain elements from those latter versions of the face because the features do get more pronounced, and what we think of in a more caricaturistic way about these particular people become more pronounced as we get older. But at the same time, I don't want her to look old. I don't want her to be old lady Judy Garland. I want her to be, this kind of youthful Judy Garland. But you can't help but from pulling those certain elements out. I have, even when I've had the opportunity, looked at photographs of people when they're children.
Really?
Because sometimes there is a little information there. Sometimes there's something that's still distinctive about the face that's showing itself in the childhood version of the face, that you can see stayed consistent, over time and so on. But yeah, in a case like that, you're talking about something that's supposed to be encapsulating really this person in her essence, which has to do with her whole career. I can tell you the other thing celebrities do that I can't stand is they have surgery. So I'm looking at this photo reference and so on, and I'm looking at some cute little pug nose on somebody, and then the next photo I look at has this nice little streamline thing, and I'm going, well, wait a minute, which nose do I do here?
Right.
So decision that you have to make there. Um, Another thing I think, we can talk about is in terms of narrative that I did think of. Well, there was a project that I did. I tried to sell it and it didn't go anywhere, but long story short, it was called Old News. And the idea was it was kind of a this week in history thing. And so you get a little chunk of paragraph, and then you get my drawing there of the person who was involved in this particular event and so on. And I did it as an online feature for a little while, but I was trying to get a paper to pick it up, but it didn't happen. But what I noticed was when I was going back through and I was collecting all this information, when you say, okay, 30, 40 years ago on this day, this particular event happened to such and such, I found myself, without really intending to, focusing entirely on these tabloid events. So the figures that I were coming up with were Speaky Fromm and Ted Kennedy and the Chappaquiddick thing, Heidi Fleiss, these kind of things, Patty Hearst, those kind of events. And I thought, well, why am I doing that? So the feature, without my really intending it to, it kind of became a little history of tabloidism, as if to say, you remember this? This is what this media environment, this was the mud that they stuck our nose in for that period of time and made us pay attention to this dumb thing. In the same way that, we'll do years and years from now when we talk about Honey Boo Boo or something like that,
Right.
Like, I don't even know who that is, for crying out loud, but we all do, because we are all connected through this sort of pop cultural enterprise. You can develop a certain level of resentment against it because it's not like folk music, where it's a culture that sort of develops organically on its own. It's it's something that the media barons from on high have decided we're going to pay attention to that week, and so on. So when you look back on it over time, you can have that attitude about it. But it's also very true that that is a connecting factor for us as people, especially for somebody of my generation who grew up exclusively in a very limited TV culture. So someone my age, I could say Jimmy Walker, and they go, oh yeah, Dynamite, because for better or worse, this stupid sitcom was the thing that we were all, collectively plugged into for that little period of time, And it's why when one of these figures passes away, that it really does seem like it's significant when it's one of your, cultural figures. It doesn't even really matter if you paid that much attention to him or you cared about him or not. But if you go, oh man, Robert Mitchum died. Oh,
Yeah.
and that's a piece of your own little personal history, the world that you grew up in, that's vanished, just like all the other pieces have vanished away.
Oh, I think that would give the narratives guys a lot to think about. So yeah.
Oh, okay, well that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. How long these things last. Ashley, I hate to cut this short because I have 1,000 more questions, but I know that the kiddos have classes.
Mhm.
Is it all right if I pass your information on to the kids if they'd like to ask you some questions?
Yes, of course. Yeah, you can get in touch with me. If all else fails, ashleyholt.com is the quickest, easiest way to see my work and send me a message, get a hold of me. Yeah, so happy to hear from anybody anytime. And thanks again for the opportunity. I'm really excited about the show. It's really a lot of fun to talk to you, and really appreciate it.
No, we really appreciate it, and we're loving having your art. And I know the whiteboard was filled up this morning, so I'll go and take some
Oh,
pictures for
okay.
you.
We got to send me a photo of that then. I
send you
got to
some
see how that's
pics.
coming along.
So yeah, we'll keep you posted on the art that's going up in your gallery, since it's a create your own art kind of space. But thank you so much for making time today, and you and I will chat soon.
Thank you, Emily. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.